All right, bet. So this is our second episode of Aintshitedness because there's a lot of people in the world that ain't shit, a
Who
lot of
just
things
ain't
that ain't
shit.
shit. And so, yo, we just felt like we needed a venue to talk about all the ain't in the world. And according to this black lady right here, I tend to be a little ain't shit sometimes. So if you're in,
Sometimes.
send this to some people, man. We better have a really important conversation about black existentialism.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, Prez? We better have an important conversation about just the manners and ways in which black people are allowed to exist. What's up, Jake? Um, and what are the barriers around black people being able to exist in the manners in which they want to exist and having freedom and having authenticity while in black skin? And so we made a pimp decision, an executive decision to dedicate this show to Elijah McClain, who
Yes.
was murdered by police officers last year. And of course, because everything that's happened with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with Ahmaud Arbery, they found it to be a crucial time to not, I don't want to say rehash, like it's an old TV show that we got tired of, but they wanted to bring his story back into the light. And so now prosecutors are re-looking into the case. So why don't you tell everybody exactly why, we decided to dedicate this show about black existentialism and black existence to Elijah McClain?
I think that just a forewarning, somebody is cutting grass. So if I start sneezing, I don't have corona. It's seasonal allergies.
Let's cover that
But
shit up. We don't want your germs.
all right, moving on. But no, putting that aside, I think that when we talk about like, we'll get into like what it means to be existential and like what that philosophy is. But putting that aside, um, what it means to live black and live freely, and also what it means to weaponize black authenticity against other black people. I'm sure some of us, I know I can personally account for like people's determining your blackness or your black card, if you will, by certain things you do, or like allowing white people into like black spaces because of certain things that they do. So the topic of living while black is something to really be discussed, and I think that Elijah McClain deserves that. Um,
Oh, go ahead.
I think like, also what it means to like what it actually means to be like typically black. That's a discussion we don't have often. I think Elijah McClain deserves that much.
I agree. I think the other thing with Elijah McClain and we had this conversation that really struck me was when you think about black people who are stopped by the police, when you think about black people who, the police are called on, right? You don't typically think about somebody who's like Elijah McClain. So if you haven't heard of the story, if you don't know, I really
Yeah.
encourage you to just Google it and read up on this kid. And literally there is camera footage of his
Camera
death,
footage, yep.
like leading from what he was doing. Like he went to a store to just buy some pop or soda or soft drinks or what have you. Now in the store, he has on a mask, right? Now, I feel like I have the ability to say this because I was a former high school teacher. He was one of the weird black kids, right? He was one of the black kids who, you wouldn't see shooting hoops after school. He was one of the black kids who you
Right,
wouldn't
but
like.
shout out to weird black kids because like I was a weird black kid.
And
I'm still a
I
weird
still am
black
a
kid.
weird black kid. My mother get on me about still watching cartoons. And I'm like, hey, yo, mind
Yeah,
your business. Like, you ain't turning this shit off 10 years ago. Like, don't start
right.
hassling me now.
Don't worry about
But,
what I'm watching now. It's not porn.
well, all right, that's another conversation for another day. But one day I'll tell you the story about how my mother went into my computer and why I do certain things now. But anyways, getting back to Elijah. So, like in his weirdness, right? And I don't want people to think that we're using weird as a pejorative. Like, honestly, you got some weird, like, black kids. Like I said, I was the weird black kid. Like, yo, and I'm
I
just
was a
gonna keep
weird
it a
kid,
static.
yeah.
When I was growing up in North Avenue in West Baltimore, guys would sit around and they would talk about girls with the fattest asses, and I would be listening to fucking Patti LaBelle. Like, I'm sorry, it's just what attracted to me. But
I think like I can definitely relate to that, but in like the female sense, I think that growing up, like I was always into like DIY projects or like animals, like doing weird things. Like my mother, she encouraged my weirdness actually. Like she bought me like I remember one Christmas I got this like rock painting kit, and like my other family was like, "What the fuck is that? Like why would
that's
you
some
buy her
white
that?"
kid stuff.
And but like I just like I was so enamored with it, and like it was the best thing ever, and it came with like these really smooth
You do
rocks, not the
realize
North
that you
Avenue
didn't have to
rocks.
get a rock painting kit to just paint some rocks, right? It's just.
No, I did because like the North Avenue rocks was too sharp. So like I needed them like them smooth manufactured.
Don't come for the rocks
The,
in my hood.
like the Landvale. I'm sorry. Back then, I was living on Landvale. The Landvale rocks was too sharp. I needed them manufactured from like Arizona rocks or something. I don't know, but
I know. I completely. I feel you on that point. And you know, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be completely honest. I think of a lot of the deaths that I've seen, and let me just say, because of my mental health, I don't watch Black Death. There are people
no,
I
I
got
will
into it with
not.
this guy on Facebook, and every time there's a Black Death quote on camera, he's recording it. And for my mental health, I just cannot participate in
And you
that.
know, I giggle at that, not at the idea of like watching Black Death, but I giggle at it because like there are so many people who consider themselves like very like pro black, and I'm not trying to attack anyone's pro blackness at the moment, but if you consider yourself
I'm
pro
not gonna
black,
point
you
any
should.
elbows at the one fat guy that won't get out my DMs, but okay. It's a bit, a little too much for you. Okay.
So, like, I'm not going to attack anyone's pro-blackness, but what I will say is that being black people, we have to really be very cautious of like the things that we share because of the trauma that it encourages and the trauma that, you know, we can trigger in other people. There's no need to, if you're going to raise awareness about George Floyd or Elijah McClain, you really don't need to share the video or the photo of George Floyd with, you know, what happened to him. You don't need to share that. You don't need to continuously let that be seen, let that be known. You are triggering people. You are
Yeah.
promoting PTSD, and that is something that we should really stop in our community. It's something that we really don't talk a lot about is how like many black people have PTSD from the way that they grew up. And because this conversation is about like black existence and black black living, I think it's also important to talk about like what it in case you know I don't want to question any insult anyone's intelligence by saying like we should say what existentialism is, but in case you don't know.
No, go ahead. So,
um
what is existentialism? The theory of existentialism.
it is a philosophy that deals with the living freely and the freedom to make choices and to develop your own path and make rational decisions in a very irrational world. Funny thing about that is like when that theory was coined, I don't know how irrational the world was for the person who coined it, but I think that relates to like black people absolutely, you know, trying to live freely and making choices that relate to your freedom. How exactly do we, people of color, black people, get to that point where we can make decisions that we can live freely or like make decisions that are rational in an irrational world? So when we think about like people like Elijah McClain, like the weird black kid, you know, this is a kid 23 years old. He played violins for kittens at a shelter, for God's sakes. Like,
Yeah.
you know, these choices that he was making in his life, it was like he was trying to make every choice to live his life freely and live it the way he thought he should, yet somehow his demise was still met by like our policing system in America.
But I
There
think
is
the important
something.
part there is like he wasn't that stereotypical black person, right? Like, when you think about somebody like Mike Brown, when you think about somebody like Big Floyd, when you think about somebody like
Uh,
Eric Garner or what have you, like these white racists could make the argument that like this big black man was
scared
intimidating,
me.
he was scaring
Yeah.
me, he was imposing. That was not Elijah at all. Like
When
in this
you
case,
see
I
his
heard
like
this guy used to play the violin for
for
kittens.
kittens at shelters, he was a vegetarian, he was an introvert. Tribute to white people. So we have class of being classically trained, playing classical music. People think about white people, although white people did not invent classical music, but that's whatever. We have like being a vegetarian, not eating like flesh. People think of like, oh, you know, I have heard so many older black people like, oh, that's white people shit. You know, you think about like, you know, I'm an introvert. He literally told the police, I'm an introvert. I don't do those kinds of things. Like
And
all these
you know
things.
what? And when he said I was an introvert, so I didn't watch the whole video because
I
I
didn't
didn't want
watch it.
to
I
see
just
the
read his
actual
statement.
beating.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
watch it. I just read
I
his
watched it to a
afterwards.
point. But when the police stopped him, which one thing I found infuriating was he was listening to headphones, or he was listening to music via headphones, right? And so,
Mhm.
when the police originally started to talk to him, like him being an alternative black person, because that's personally what I like to call it. I
Yeah.
call black people who don't do all the typical black shit I call them alternative Black people, because, and I say that because we have alternative interests, but don't forget the fact that we are still Black people and
We're
we are
still
still
Black, yeah.
authentically Black. And no one in the Black community gets to decide who's more authentically Black than anybody else. And at some point, we got to do a show about
Yeah.
biracial Black people, because I've been hearing a lot about, like, oh, this person not really Black, and I'm like, whoa, 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 pump your brakes.
I think
But
so.
you know,
Before you move off that point, I think like because we live in a white supremacist world, it's really hard to take like blackness away from someone who has a black parent and a white parent, or a black parent and whatever other parent. It's really hard to like take their blackness away. But moving on.
yeah,
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 it
yeah.
is.
And it's so funny because although Elijah was this alternative Black kid, although he wasn't like your stereotypical, like, this guy was smaller than me. I stand at about 5'7" with shoes on, right? I might look tall, but I'm really short.
You have
Screw my
tall
dad for
energy.
not giving me his height. But
Yeah, you exude
that
tall
could not,
energy.
right, you feel me? But I always say, people like, what's your real name? I say my name is Shaquille, like Shaquille O'Neal. I'm just 5 feet shorter. Promise you that's the only difference. But that could not protect Elijah
Not
from
at all.
the
Not at
race
all.
hatred that our skin color implicates, right? And so
And
for
I
me,
think there is I'm sorry,
I
go
have an
on.
issue with that.
I think there is something to be said about like what it means to be like authentically black and what it means for so blackness is viewed differently by a lot of different people. So when you look at like how white people they want to view blackness as this box. They want to view blackness as and there's nothing wrong with like George Floyd or Mike Brown or Eric Garner, but white people want to view blackness as that. They want to attach certain attributes and certain things to blackness so they can like have a reason to like vilify it
But you know what that
when
reasoning
you
is, though? It's like, I took issue during the Baltimore uprising when Baltimore politicians went on the news and they referred to the young people, what's up, cuz? And they referred to the young people who are out protesting as thugs.
as
And I
thugs.
went on the news and I said, listen, language is important. And I dwell in a world of, the quote is, I dwell in a world of possibilities, but I dwell
Hmm.
in the world of language. And
Yeah.
for me, hey, Joy, and for me, um, once you prescribe a certain word to a person, then that
Hmm.
gives you license to treat that person in a certain way,
Different.
right?
I mean,
And so when you
yeah.
define that, and here's the thing about definitions, and this is why I love Toni Morrison. Rest in peace to the Queen. She told us, definitions belong to the definers, not the defined. And so, although whiteness and white supremacy has
Yeah.
defined us in these certain ways, it had white supremacy has done that because it then gives them license to treat us in a certain way, right? So when these
Right.
caricatures of Black people, like back in the 1920s and the 1930s, and even before that, started to be created, it was Black men are hypersexual, and all Black men want to do is
Hmm.
go out here and rape white women. Black men are the bucks, right? Black men are dumb. Black women are whores. One of the things I used to tell my high school students, I'm like, bro, Black people weren't considered lazy until we stopped working for
At
white
working
people
for
for
free.
free.
Right. And I used to have to like tell like the kids that I taught that to. They used to be like, "Oh, niggas are so lazy," and I was like, "That's not exactly true. Black people are really the only people that are called lazy because we demand to be paid our worth." And I think that bringing it back full circle when it comes to worth, and everything you said is 100. I 100% agree with, and I will add that when we start stepping out of these things that white people can't define, that's when like things become tricky. So that's when it's like not only am I angry by this, but somehow I'm also intimidated by this.
Mm.
I'll tell you like an example from my personal life. I once worked at this very racist spa. Won't say no names, but I was sharing with my white manager like my experience how I studied abroad in Ireland, and like I used some word. It really wasn't that big of a word, but she goes, "How does a person from your demographic afford to go to Ireland and afford the vocabulary that you does?" And I realized like white people, they get very angry and they start to get intimidated because it's just like when you don't have this shield of blackness that they think you should, their world starts to frazzle. It's kind of like their abstract thought becomes like 2D. Like everything
You know
just
what?
comes
Before I want
crashing
to ask a
down.
question to the people who are watching, but before I ask that question, um, I I had an experience similar when I was working at. I'll say the name because I think after teaching in Baltimore City public high schools, the kids are kind of rubbed off on me. So I'll say the name because I
Yeah.
just feel like ain't none of them gonna hit me in my mouth. So
That is my life motto though. But like nobody's gonna go there, but go ahead.
when I was working at what's up, bro? When I was working at Center Stage, this white man had like a pail of papers with him, right? And so I was
Hmm.
working at the box office. So he's like, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind throwing these papers away? I feel like I'm carrying around my college dissertation." And you know, me just trying to be, you know, the uppity Negro so I can get that check. I go, "Okay, well, what was your dissertation on?" And he goes, "Ironically, it was on the KKK in the 1940s." And I thought to myself, what the fuck is ironic about that situation? But that's neither here nor there now because they fired me because a white woman, she demanded that I gave her a discount that literally I couldn't put the discount in the computer because the discount wouldn't take it. And so she
Where
was
was this?
upset because this is at Center Stage, the State Theater of Maryland. And so she was
Oh,
demanding to me that I give her a discount. And I'm like, you got to take that up with mailing because she was saying that she got the discount code in her mail late. And I'm like, that's not a box office thing. That's a mailing department thing. You need to
yeah,
talk
that's
to
not your
them.
fault.
And literally, if she had been nice, I would have found another comparable discount that I could put in the computer. But she was being an asshole. And so she got to a point where she was like, well, I've been a subscriber here for over 30 years. And I said, Miss, that ain't important to nobody but you. And she went, well, I have never. And then I went,
You know what?
well, I'm happy to be the first. But I do want to ask a question to the people who are watching, right? For the people who just joined, we're talking about Black existentialism and alternative Black people. We define alternative Black people as Black people who have alternative interests, right? So these are your Black people who may be into anime, who may want to be fucking ninjas, who, you know, like rock and
They
roll,
might
like 90s
even,
rap music.
do that Naruto run down the hallway that we love to laugh at. Like,
Yo, it's this one boy. He sent me a friend request on Facebook, and I've been wondering, do I want to accept it? Because he used to do fucking ninja flips down the hallway. And
Yeah, yeah,
okay, I'm
yeah,
not gonna
yeah.
talk about him, but I just posted in the comment because I really want to know what you guys think. Do you feel like alternative Black people have space to exist authentically in our culture? Like the Black people who, and if you think so, tell us where.
Right, because you know what? I think the funny thing, well, you know what? I will tell people, don't ever go to any Elizabeth
Yes,
Arden
you
or Red
did,
Door
Avant.
spas. Like, don't ever go to any Red Door spas or any Elizabeth Arden spas. Don't go to the Green Turtle. Like, none of that. They're all racist. But I think that what I used to tell like the weird Black kids that I taught, because this was something I had to tell myself, is like, you'll find your I found my people in like college, like late high school, college kind of. That's where I found like my people. And it is hard to find your people when you've been called weird your entire life or different or whatever, what have you. I've even been called, like, I remember my father's ex-wife, she used to tell me that I was like a white girl in a black girl's body. Ugh, the nerve of such. But um I think you find your people,
So every time
you
I
have to
hear
work
that,
a
I'm
little harder.
sorry. I just think about Dave Chappelle and that Chinese man stuck in a black man body. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Like, I just can't believe but she was saying this to a kid in middle school. Middle school is already a tough time for children anyway. You're just like, life is so hard. I need to find myself. And then like having somebody tell you that about yourself is just it's just another layer of like, what's going on with me? You know? I think that I had to work a little bit harder to find my people, but like I found them eventually. Yvonne says no, and I say no because we make fun of them. We don't
Mm-hmm.
allow them to express themselves. Which, Yvonne, I will say that is true. I think that we do have a problem with, like, when it comes to like blackness, accepting different forms of blackness. Black people are not a monolith. We are not, and I know like somebody will say you're using that word incorrectly. Bye. Black people are not homogenous. We're not one thing. We can have like, that's why we have Slash and Jimi Hendrix. That's why we had these people. That's why we had Tracy Chapman. There are alternative Black people with alternative interests, and they deserve to have we deserve to have our spaces.
Yeah.
Um,
So somebody said, a Mousdy, that this is why
oh, hey, Amal.
intersectionality is so key. Yo, like 100%. Like we got to get, like you said, like we're not homogenous, like we're not like this monolithic group of people. Like there's such great diversity in our community. And just because a black kid doesn't want to rap, doesn't want to wear sneakers, like, yo, there's nothing wrong with that. And then Katie comes in and she says, yes, I believe now is the time for Black people to live in their truth. I say that
Yes.
all the time on Twitter. So I'm going to say also, like, shout out to the people who've actually created these spaces. And we had some people who said no, and one person who said hell no. Or that was, you said her name was Amal? Yeah, she
No,
said
I'm
hell
all.
no.
Yeah.
My brother says, yes, intersectionality is critical. I highly recommend Patricia Hill Collins. But see, that's what I hate about motherfuckers who get master's degrees. They always want to recommend niggas read some shit. Like, come on now. Like, we just trying to
Okay,
sit here and
like,
have a conversation. We ain't
excuse
trying to
me. That's
read.
gonna be me in 2 years. I highly recommend you read. But you know, thank you for the recommendation. Is that Jacob Brandon? Thank you,
Yeah,
Jacob
his
Brandon.
name
Okay.
is Bernie. You actually know him. He used to play on the Bernie Mac show. It's Jordan.
Oh,
Okay,
I know
Katie,
you
I'm gonna stop.
lying.
Okay, I'm gonna
I
stop.
know you lying. Like, I hate you. But I think that see, this is why Aintshitedness exists. Like, prime example. Um, I think that we have to stop defining blackness by the things that like our like grandparents and great parent words. Our parents, our grandparents and great grandparents used to define blackness. So like, you know, when I became a pescatarian, I remember my grandmother, she was like, that's white people shit. Or like when I was like, you know what, I think that I'm going to get an MFA, somebody was like, that's white people shit, that's not practical. I was like, well, tell me, what is black people shit then? Please enlighten me. Because like everything that I do is white people shit. Um, in some way, shape, or form. So, you know, and it's like when you ask people that question, so you know, for the people watching, what do you think is black people shit? I'll let you answer, but then I'll also tell you what someone told me black people shit was, and it might not make you happy with the answer that I was given. Um, the answer that I was given, it was like a bunch of like stereotypical attributes of like what it means to be black. So it's like, you know, my grandmother was like, black people eat like pork and chicken, and that's what, you know, makes you black. Like soul food makes you black. Um,
All right, so everybody just check as she goes through this list if any of this applies to you. Okay, so
yeah,
that
let me
does
let me
apply to
see.
me, but okay, go ahead.
Soul food makes you black. What else did she say? You know, like
What's that game we used to play in college? We had to put a finger down.
never have I ever.
Yeah, never have I ever. Okay, so okay, soul food,
What the fuck
chicken and
did she
pork.
say?
Okay.
Yeah, she was like chicken, pork, soul food. Are you holding up fingers for all three?
Oh no, just
For
one
all?
because I think all that go together.
Yeah. What else did she say? She said like she actually told me like you know being a writer is white people shit. So apparently that is not black. Which
Okay.
I like. I argued her up and down, like until like I was like blue in the face about that. And I was like, so many so many black people that came before us were great writers. Like you know, like you can't possibly say that. And I'm trying to think about what else she said was black people shit. I
So
think
just
like
put up
it was
four fingers.
like I remember distinctively it like being like soul food and there were a lot there were just more
Exactly, Cat.
things right. Listen. That lady ignorant. That's all I can tell you. There's no other excuse for it. But I just remember like so many things like people saying black people don't do and whatever is the opposite of that that defines blackness. So not writing, not being a pescatarian, not being vegan, not being vegetarian. Um what was the other one? Oh, apparently like not eating sushi makes you black, you know. Um
Man, I eat sushi. Hold on, was I putting things down that made me black or made me not black? This is too much to
I
keep
don't
up with. So,
I
cause
know like I don't remember but like we have to stop doing this to black people because then that's how you get little black boys and little black girls who like start dating white people because they were like black people never liked me. And you know that that's such a heartbreaking statement actually a little bit. Um this is exactly how we get people that are like, oh, black girls never liked me, so I started dating white girls. Or like white black boys told me I was ugly, or they told me I was weird. So that's why now I'm married to like this
but
white
there's
man
some
with a double
truth in that
chin.
though. So I just want to say, if you're just joining us, we're talking about Black existentialism and whether or not Black people can exist authentically in our culture. But I do think that there is little truth in that, right? So and also think about where a person grows up. Like I grew up
Mhm.
in like real urban West Baltimore, and it is true. Like if you was the weird Black girl Um, like the boy on the
I was
basketball team wasn't checking for you. You know what I
listen
mean? Like the jock,
in
the class
elementary
clown who was
school.
funny.
In elementary school and in middle school, I was like crucified by my peers. Like, I used to read Harry Potter, and I used to like. I actually started writing, believe it or not, like an early form of fan fiction based on Harry Potter, and like the kids thought that was like so
But you
weird.
know what's so funny? When my grandfather passed away in November, I actually went. We were cleaning out his house, and I found like an old notebook from like when I was in the sixth grade, where like I was creating like superheroes because like I was that in love with
Yeah, and I remember, yeah, I remember like I started like writing this comic book about this girl and her sister who was like lost in the jungle, and even my like teachers were like, you're a weird little girl. Like even like my teachers said that they were like, you are very strange from your peers. You're very different. And like I quickly learned that like different was code for weird and weird was code for bad.
yeah.
Like they liked it because they were like, oh, you're well behaved, but you're also like weird. You're also different.
Real quick, so Kat just commented, black people shit was defined um, by me before coming to an HBCU.
Yes,
It
Kat.
was basically anything out of the norm of what it was expected of my background. Example, my
Mhm.
name and two-parent household. I played tennis. I just want to say, like, based off that comment, this is why I also think that representation is really important, and having
100%.
older black people in your life that support those interests is really important.
Yeah.
And the ignorant stereotypes about like it watermelon. And, you
Watermelon.
know, I
Oh,
want to say something about that too. Like Kat brought up a really interesting thing. So I remember in college we were reading not a manifesto, but an article written by
uh-huh.
James Baldwin. And so James Baldwin even said that he had never tried watermelon or fried chicken until he moved to Paris. And the reason he did not was because it was, even in the 60s, such a stereotypical thing for black people to
Mhm.
do and for black people to like. And the history behind that is there was a Nickelodeon reel of this random black man that nobody knows just like eating and engorging
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a watermelon. And so
Watermelon.
they took that image and they started to like put that image everywhere. And so now all black people like, and to be honest with you, I don't even really like watermelon like that.
And
But
the
James
thing is
Baldwin
though,
also wrote that he felt bad and almost ashamed that he waited so long to enjoy the delicacy of watermelon and fried chicken because of the stereotypes that white supremacy and society put
and
on
then
that
you
stopped
also
us from
think
doing it.
about like
But also, I want to say something about don't forget your point because I don't want to lose mine. The playing tennis part and like
Arthur Ashe played tennis. What?
the representation, right? Like, you know, I hate when I hear people say things like, "Oh, I don't care about Bubba Wallace, who's in NASCAR right now." Like, yo, there's a black
Yeah.
kid out there right now who's looking at Bubba Wallace like, "Yo, you are my quintessential hero. Fuck Batman
Yes.
and Spider Man." And also, I just want to say because it's really near and dear to my heart. And Montez, you and I have had this conversation before. My first week of teaching, I had a black boy. His name is Josh, who we were talking about, you know, fearlessly being you. And I wanted to have that conversation with my seniors because I have always been that black person who just didn't give a fuck. And I was always determined to be exactly me and who I am.
Mhm.
And the second week of school, I think we had this conversation. He says, I want to be a dancer, but I've never talked about it. I've never, you know, pursued it the way
Mm.
I should because
Ah,
people would call
yes.
me gay and people would call me this and people would call me that, right? Talking about the alternative kids. Like, he not trying to shoot hoops. He not trying to catch a football. This nigga just want to dance and fucking plie all his life. And I'm like, yo, if you want to plie and do a downward dog or whatever it is that dancers do, I'm all for that. So I made the determination right then and there. Every year when I'm
Downward
trying to be
dog.
a bougie black person, I
Downward
always
dog.
go to see the Alvin Ailey dances. They always go to the
Yeah,
Lyric
Alvin
Opera
Ailey.
House in Baltimore. Yo, if you don't know about the Alvin Ailey dancers and you ever want to see a dance concert, yo, go see the Alvin Ailey dancers. Yo, I took him to go see the Alvin Ailey dancers. And for the entire hour and a half show, this boy did not sit back in his seat not once. He was at the edge of his seat the
Mhm.
entire time. Adrian, I'm not playing with you. He just said watermelon is amazing. I
I
just
know.
tried
I
that.
just said yes, juiced. Yes, juiced. I think representation is so important, which is why, going back to the conversation we were having about watermelon, you also remember, I can understand James Baldwin's like discomfort with it though, because remember, alongside that reel, they started putting like the minstrel face on people eating like these very large pieces of watermelon, and then you had the people in blackface with the extremely red lips, like chomping down on watermelon. It's like That was another way white supremacy found a way to take something away from blackness. After slavery, slaves were making income from watermelon farms. And, white people were like, oh, they're getting all this income. They are becoming self sufficient. We don't like self sufficient Negroes. So let's, like, make this a very negative thing and tarnish the image of watermelon. And then there you have it. So we attached this minstrel face to watermelon. And, people are like, oh, I don't want to be the one that's farming, the thing that was attached to the minstrel face. Like,
Yeah.
I remember growing up playing tournaments at country clubs and literally, okay, to this day, honestly, I don't eat watermelon in public because especially like when white people are present, because I just feel like they're just like I just feel like they are just watching and waiting to be like, yes,
So
yes.
my cousin just said something that I think is really interesting too, and like how these an interesting take and how these stereotypes probably started to come into fruition. So all right, so my great grandfather had 17
Yeah, I just
kids,
read that.
and you know how do I say this? People weren't wearing condoms back in the day. You know what I mean? Like they were popping kids out left and right, and it's just the truth. And so he's saying that a lot of times those things were bought because they were cheap
Mhm.
and people could just afford it. And
Yeah.
black people in particular, if you look back at your family lines and you think about like how many kids like your grandparents, your great grandparents, your great great
Mhm.
grandparents had, like in all aspects of my family, all of them had like I don't think nobody had less than 5 kids. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
in that regard, that does make a lot of sense.
Like it, and it's like it was very economical because you think about like people living on farms or in proximity to farms. So you have chickens, you have watermelon, then you have black people selling other black people watermelon. Also very economical. So, that became like a thing, chicken and watermelon. But again, white people, they just love to take things from black people and say like, oh, them niggers is making money. How can we put a stop to that? Hmm. We always have to like vilify or damn something that's attached to blackness. We have to make it absurd, so absurd that people don't want to do it or people don't want to like see it or attach themselves to it anymore. Which is why I think that that's the same thing that happened with many genres of music. White people are like, we like this. Negroes are doing it. How can we get it so
I got
that
a
we can take
question
what
for
we
you
like?
though, real quick. Um, what do you think about the popularity of like a Lakeith Stanfield, the popularity of Donald Glover? What's his rapping name? Childish Gambino.
Childish
Like these
Gambino.
are like the weird black guys. I mean, even about SZA, right? Because like SZA is like that weird black girl too. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about their popularity and their influence on the culture? Because like we seem to love them, but then we look down on the
Right.
fucking
So it's
kids that
like
want to be
we
ninjas.
we love stop with the ninja. Like we love to see, and that's the thing. Like I can even think about it. It's like we love to see blackness when there's like wealth and fame attached to it. So Lakeith Stanfield. First of all, I love them. Like Childish Gambino is my guilty pleasure, and then like I love Lakeith Stanfield and SZA. But it's just something about like one thing about blackness. I love blackness, but one thing I do not love about blackness is that people seem to like it a lot more when it is attached to like white wealth, and that's something about blackness that I do not love. Um, it seems like when they can. Oh yes, Rico Nasty. Yes, she is alternative. Love Rico Nasty. But there's just something about that when people have achieved like white wealth and they can sit at these tables with white people and like Childish Gambino has these TV shows and he hires these writers and he can tell like white people what to do. Like we love that because it's like, yeah, look at them. They have this wealth and they have the things that we want to achieve and that's why we love them. I will say I am happy that they do have their notoriety because as you know, we always say representation matters and we need that representation. But we
But
need that
don't watch a Lakeith
representation.
Stanfield movie and be like, oh, Lakeith Stanfield's so fine. And then go and be like, yo, I think Tiffany fucking daughter is weird. Like, did you see her ass like freaking playing with the like you know what I mean? Like
Right.
and then
Oh,
you know what?
yes,
I think the other
Adrian.
thing that really pisses me off with this,
Adrian, Childish Gambino is with the white woman. I don't know about Lakeith,
yeah,
but yes.
he better not be. But I think another thing is, and this really pisses me off. Let kids be kids, right? And to be honest
100%.
with you, people say what they want about the Smith family. I think that
Yo,
those two children that Will and Jada Pinkett Smith have raised, I think that they are the perfect example of free black children. And talking of
yes,
alternative
Adrian.
black kids, when I was a teacher, I had a student that I used to jokingly call my son. And yo, his mother did such a great job with him because let me tell you, this guy would wear freaking checkered shoes, a checkered shirt, had hair fucking wild and all over the goddamn place, and just existing in the way and in the world that he wanted to exist. And I got really upset one day because all the teachers, we went out to a happy hour,
I did
and
that once, and never mind that story, but go on.
yeah, we went out to a happy hour, and so let me just
Yeah.
give you the
So
background to
there's
this
like a
teacher who
marching
said
band.
something
Sorry, there's a
negative.
marching band practicing behind me if you can hear that. But go on
Okay.
if you didn't hear that.
Shout out to the marching bands in Baltimore. But yo, we were all
I
out,
know.
we're having a good time. Some way, somehow, my student comes up in the conversation. And if you know me as a teacher, you know that I'm very protective or over my kids. And she makes the comment, he needs to get his split ends cut. And
Girl, so do
in my
you.
mind, I'm like, yo, this boy is, if not one of the smartest, he is the most intelligent student in this entire school. He is articulate. He is a very talented writer, a very talented artist. Of all the things that you could have said about this boy in front of every other adult who works in the school, is he need to get his split ends cut. And so this black woman who said that, I just want to give you some background on her and why I find her to be problematic. She is a black woman. Okay.
I know
But
you see
she's a
this
black
lady
woman.
like,
Oh, I love it. I love it.
right?
I mean, at some point in time, somebody needs to do a documentary exploring the marching band culture in Baltimore. Niggas ain't never got no horns or no trumpets. I guess they can't afford it. It ain't nothing but drums, but I love it because it's
I
so
know.
essential to who we are as African people. But
Exactly. Shout out to the
she,
Rick and Morty shirt too. But yes.
no. But black woman from Black Baltimore. She has went to nothing but white universities. She has
Of course.
two half-white sons by two different white men and is married to a white man. And so for me, I think that that's some existential dilemmas going on where you don't find value in blackness because you ain't never go to a
Mhm.
black school, because you ain't never, made a child with a black man, you decided to marry a non-black man. So axiologically, when we're talking about value, you find a lack of value in blackness and obviously in black men and boys. And so you go and of all the things you could have said about this amazing, ultra talented black boy was he needed to get his split ends clipped.
Right. And you
Like,
know
and
what? I
then had
do
the
take
nerve to wear the same braids from August all the way to December. What did Cookie say on Empire? Your scalp smelling like goat ass. I ain't never smelled goat ass, but I assume that, yeah, probably what I said.
you know what? In reference to that though, we do, and this is how like black children learn to censor their talent, and black children learn to like be ashamed of their brilliance. She doesn't sound like
No.
she likes herself. She probably didn't. This is how black children learn to censor their brilliance, because like people focus on things like that instead. So like, oh, instead of talking about how smart he is or how wonderful he is, you talk about his split ends need to be cut. How would you know? You haven't seen yours in a while. How would you know what a split end looks like? Um, putting that aside, it's like those are the things that this is what I'm talking about. Or even like when I taught high school, you had like teachers would like make comments or jokes about like, there was like a boy, he used to wear like gloves. Like, like the weird kids, they would just wear fingerless gloves. It'd be 90 degrees outside. You don't know why. You just let them wear their gloves and be happy. But, there were like teachers that would always make comments about him, like, oh, look at him, like something's not right with him. Like, he's going to be the first black Unabomber, terrible things like that. And I'm just like, no, he's just doing his thing. He has his own style. And I really think we need to have these conversations with ourselves and with each other. Like, you brought up Will and Jada Pinkett's kids, and like, one thing I sat and thought about, I was like, so many people dislike them or make comments about them because they have the freedoms that they were denied in their
Mm.
youth. You think about like, growing up, think about like being a little black girl asking your mother, can you do something with your hair? No. Before you could probably even get the question out, the answer was no. Can I? No. What about if I no? You know, it was always like you gonna put these damn barrettes in, these braids, these cornrows, and you gonna sit the fuck down and call it a day.
Or
It
them
was that
damn
kind of
sweater
thing.
jackets that you and Kendra used to wear, but I digress.
Excuse me. Sweater vests were in style. I was on my way to being a mini librarian. Okay, like I'm. You know, I wish I had that picture with me because I would show you how fresh I was back in 96. Or no, like 99 when I had the sweater vest. Anyway, but like you know, or think about like black boys, you know, bringing up the example of like I'll bring up I have a younger brother and he loves to play baseball. Right? He loves baseball, whatever. When he left the state of Maryland, his mother told him that he could no longer play baseball because that was a white boy sport. So she started to make him play football. Now, my brother isn't like he's not super tall and he's not super like stocky. And like, you know, he's learned to like football, but he really loves baseball. And that's
Right.
the baseball's not even an alternative thing. But in my mind, I'm thinking about look at the tone, look at the message, look at what's being said here by telling a little black boy, you can't play baseball because that's not what black people do. That's
But
white
who gets
people
to
shit.
determine what is authentic blackness? Like, where
Right.
in the culture who makes that determination? And who can determine black authenticity? Because I do think I'll say that I think that there are times where it is appropriate to call out inauthenticity in our community. But when is it appropriate, or we talked a lot about when is it inappropriate, but is there ever a time where saying someone is not authentically black, is there ever a time it is appropriate?
Sorry, there's a comment. It was like from Ben Harvey. It's like I find it so easy that people can talk about people they never met, never spent any time around, but always have an opinion. My daddy said opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. And I'm being someone who knows Will Smith personally, and he's not my family for years is crazy to me. Yeah, I don't know. Like again, people love to criticize like what they think blackness should be. So like having giving your kids to be the freedom to be kids and to explore things and try things and do whatever. People seem to think that's like, oh, that's bad parenting. It's not actually. Like their kids are pretty successful and they're probably happy, unlike some of us who grew up in like these very like chokehold households and were told no, we couldn't do anything. But your question was who gets to determine what's authentically black? And you
Or
know
when
that's
is
a
it,
really
or more so, um, when is it appropriate to say that someone is not authentically black? When is that appropriate?
you know what? I think that question goes to like when it becomes anti-blackness. So when you're starting to teeter that line, I don't even know if that becomes a question of like being authentically black, but it's like I think blackness, like everything else, like normalcy, like everything else in this world exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So we can have these tiered interests, we can have these interests about things, and that doesn't mean you're not black. I will say, like, I think people should start getting called out when they start being anti-black or saying anti-black things. So let's go back to your coworker, the Goat Scout coworker you had. Um, you know, her I wouldn't even consider her like alternative per se. Just like her,
No, she just confused.
yeah, like she is teetering the line of anti-blackness because not only does she refuses to see like humanity in black men so much so she doesn't even want to date them. She tried her best to create human beings who weren't black from her own womb.
But you know what? To that point about her anti-blackness, I remember one time we were having professional development, and the school at the time had majority black male teachers. This was unprecedented in Baltimore City public schools.
I know,
Like in
like
most schools, you
wow.
couldn't find one black male teacher. Here, you got 10 teachers, and 6 of us are black men. Um, and we at PD, and all the black men are talking about all the things we're gonna do. Like I'm gonna introduce them to this black author and this black author, and
Oh,
the math teacher is like, yeah, we're gonna teach them how Egyptians created math, and then the history teacher like we're gonna teach them the history before slavery, and then another teacher comes and he's like, we're gonna
swoon.
do this for the black, and like we're all excited, like the black consciousness that we can bring to these
And
kids
what
in the
did she?
school.
I just
Yo,
feel like
she
the Uncle Ruckus music is literally playing in my head in anticipation for what she is about to say. Like it's like
Yo, Montez, she
in my
broke
head.
down in tears. Out of 150 students in the school, 7 of them were white out of the 150 students. She literally broke down in tears, screaming, what about the 7 of the 150 white kids? And so one of the teachers said, well, if this was vice versa, and it was 152 or 153, oh shit, my math all wrong. This is why I got my degree in English. It was 143 white kids and 7 black kids. No one would be having the conversation. What's up, big sis? No one will be having the conversation about, oh, what about the 7 black kids that are in the school? So she was like, well, my sons aren't just black. My sons are half white too. And like all the black men were just sitting there like, yeah, your son's probably not a white daddy, but as your sons go through the world, they're going to be circumventing this world.
But here's the thing. I was going to say, here's the thing though. And the thing with white supremacy, you know, I've had this conversation with a biracial person personally. Like, white supremacy does not allow you just to be white. Like, white supremacy doesn't give you that privilege. I'm sorry. Like, unless you are white passing. But, like, a lot of times these biracial people are not. And although your sons have a white father, congratulations. Would you like me to give you a prize for that? I mean, they are still black. They came from a black womb. And the fact that you need to emphasize that my sons are not just black, what are you saying? They live in a world full of whiteness. They are going to learn rewritten white history. They're going to learn how wonderful people want white people to see the world.
Yeah.
Black kids need black history as told by black people. Black kids need black literature as read by black people. Black people need black math as done by black people. Because where else are you going to get someone that's going to tell you the Egyptians were the first mathematicians? Where else are you going to get someone to tell you that, you know, in Africa they had Africans are so amazing. Like, they are so amazing. Africans were performing the first version of the C-section before it had a fucking name. Yeah. Like, yes. Ancient African women were getting C-sections and surviving flawlessly.
I just wrote a blog about how black people are the plug that the world ran off on more than twice. And like one of the things I mentioned in there is the embalming method that the Kemites created. This is something that Western European science can't replicate even into this day. So we got 8 minutes left, and I wanted to talk real quick about the BC, because I know that some black people have had different experiences with it. I'm gonna tell you what the BC is. But
yeah.
So for me, like, I was indeed like that weird black kid growing up. Like, yo, when we used to sit on the block and like smoke Black and Mild, because before we started experimenting with weed, like even before we started experimenting with cigarettes, we were smoking Black and Milds for some reason. It was something.
I never smoked the black.
I never don't know what it was about North Avenue and Pulaski, but it was something sexy to us about Black and Milds. We were smoking blacks. While all the other boys would be sitting around talking about, like, you know, what girl got the fattest ass, and, you know, as J. Cole said, how we gonna smash all the bitches in class. Like, I was the black kid who every day, Monday through Friday, I was on my grandfather's floor, because we was poor black folk. We ain't had cable. My cable ran from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. That was the afternoon cartoons, and then fucking PBS if I wanted to watch cartoons. But then I had to watch shit like Arthur. So every day from 5 to 6, I'm on my grandfather's floor watching the Justice League, right? I'm in love with comic books, but something was a little different about me, right? Because I grew up in a very, like, hood family, and even my non-hood family members are, like, hood adjacent. And so, like, I knew how to navigate in a space around, like, straight black men in those areas of hyper masculinity, because I was around my uncles, right? I was around my cousins. And so my question is, like, for the black people who don't know how to circumvent those spaces, like, how do they circumvent those spaces, right? And then my follow-up question is, in the BC is, all right, here it is. It's the black card. Is it damaging to take black people's black card away? Although it's not a real card, although it's something we do symbolically, like, what is your take? And I may fire off in the comments too if you want to, but like, what is your take on the taking away of black cards and being able to, like, you know, move in both spaces?
I have an intense eye roll to the black card. Because my experience with the black card hasn't ever been positive, and I say that in the sense that not only was my black card constantly being taken away by both black and white people, they were like, "Oh, you've never done this. You're not black." I remember I worked at Barnes and Noble, and this manager, he was asking me about something, and I was like, "No, I don't do that, or I haven't done that." And like he was a white bald man with like these like circular wireframe glasses, and he thought he was cool because he had a black wife. So he was like, "Oh, I'm blacker than you are. I'm taking your black card." And I was like, "Bitch,
Wait a minute.
where?" Um,
Can we
and
determine
then
some rules for the black? Like, I don't want to get rid of the black card. We got to tell like white people can't take black cards.
right, and that's why I was like, and my black coworkers was like, "Yeah, George took your black card." I was like, "Bitch, where? How? I was born this way." But then, it was also like in my experience, it's also like people giving white people black cards, like, "Oh, he knows who Ice Cube is, or he knows NWA. He can say nigga. Let's give him a black card." And it's just like, I'm searching for where that's right. Like, I don't understand. Like, but that's, other people such as you've had a more pleasant experience with black cards, and like black people showing you things, or like hipping you to like other black things.
So I'll say this:
That,
the last time, first off, Yvonne, you funny as shit. She's like,
that's true. All
is
skin
going to
folk,
her thing. All
right?
skin
All
folk
skin
ain't your
folk
kin
and
folk.
kinfolk. That is very true,
To be
Yvonne.
honest with you, I wish black cards were actually real things, but I do think that some black people need their black cards taken away. Like when you do things, and I think it goes back to what you said, like when you start to teeter the line of anti-blackness, like if you ever heard of the
Yeah,
Hodge twins or just certain black people that exist in the world that they work for the White People Protection Agency, and it seems
yeah,
like
I
everything that
agree.
they do in their life is to protect whiteness. At that point, it's like
Yes.
don't even say you black. Just exit the damn
Right. What's
the community.
that Lisa Simpson meme where she'd be like, "Go ahead, log out, baby," and Lisa be looking up at Marge on the
Right.
computer. Like, I think,
SpongeBob, like, all right, I'm gonna head out. Like,
all
no,
right,
we
I'm
need
gonna
to
head
have.
out.
I
Like,
also wish we had a racial draft. Like, if we could draft like Candace Owen for like Rosie Perez, the Latino girl who played Mookie's girlfriend and Do the Right
well, yeah,
Thing.
I mean, Rosie Perez is Afro Latino.
I mean, okay, way to shit on my point on the live, Monte,
No,
but get the
no,
point
that's not what I meant.
that
Okay,
I'm trying to make. Or we
I
could
understood
trade
what you
her for
meant.
Gary Owen, okay? Because Gary Owen is white. We could trade her for Gary Owen. But but my experience with the black card, it was always about authenticity and blackness. Um, Growing up in Black Baltimore, and we talk about culture because you'll know I talk about culture a lot. Culture can be passed on through three major ways: through proximity, shared experience, and racial
Yep.
identity.
Yeah.
And via shared experience, proximity, and racial identity, I just grew up around all black people. So my world growing up was black. So we didn't have
Yeah.
white people to give the black card away to. I mean, we had white people, but they were so few and far in between.
I think the
And we
only
also
white
had
people
white
that
Latinos on North Avenue, which is really weird. But we would take away a black card because you don't know how to two step. But then it was out of love, and we would do things like we would teach you how to two step, right? Or you
right,
remember
but
that
I
dance
think
used to do the drop back. You don't remember
yes,
the drop back, okay? But
yes.
yeah, we would. So let me just say this:
Listen, I
my
was
last
born
time getting my
60
black card taken away, I was a sophomore at university, and
at university.
yeah, I got to be a distinguished Negro. But I was a sophomore, and I did not see juice. And my friends Mia and Tiana was like, "Yo, they literally wrote it out. Like taking away your black card." But then it was followed up with, "What you doing later? We about to watch Juice."
Right, but I think I think the other problem is like in the quick that we have left, like that second component, like but they were doing it like out of love and jokingly. So you have people who do things like you like anime, you're not black. Let me take your black card. You know, like that kind of thing. It's not like, "Oh, you've never seen Juice, so now I'm going to show you Juice." That follow up for the culture is not happening. And that's why now we have so many kids that are like, "I'm black and black people don't like me," because like no one is giving them that follow up to the culture. And I think like if we want to produce like more culturally competent individuals, we need to make sure they have that follow up to the culture. So, oh, you don't know who Zora Neale Hurston is? Okay, let me hip you to who she is. You never heard of James Baldwin? Okay, you never heard of Asada Shakur? I'm a hip you real quick. It's
And
not
let me
like
say this. because we got a minute and 30 seconds left.
I'll
Those
eat
people,
ketchup.
those
Sorry.
alternative Black people, give them space to be themselves
Yeah.
wildly and authentically, because we need Black people like the Serena and Venus Williams. We need Black people like the sister who has been killing it in ballet, like Simone Biles. Give them that
Who's the
space because
yeah
they
the
represent the medalists, because they give space, for people in our community who want to feel represented also.
right? And I think you also need to give children the room to grow because like let's think about like those weird people also have sometimes they have really brilliant minds. And we need more brilliant black minds to do more brilliant black
Absolutely.
things. And honestly, I don't know anyone who knows how to play spades because you know old folks always used to tell you get out the kitchen, stay out of grown folks' business. So I don't really know anyone who knows how to play spades because like grown people never taught you. So
Yeah, every family gathering, my cousin's always cussing me out. But I want to say thank you for everybody who joined. This is the pregame to the podcast. The podcast is going to be coming within like the month, in a month or two. So right now we're just going to be doing these Instagram lives. Follow myself at _carbon with a 0. Follow Montez at precise_pros. We're going to be
yeah,
dropping flyers and probably doing these shows every other week. And yo, hit us up in our DMs if like you want us to cover a certain topic. We're talking about the culture and we're talking about how the world ain't shit. The name of our show is Aintshitedness.
Aintshitedness
Don't steal our
because
word. We got to get the copyrights. But thank you all for joining us. I'll talk to you later, sis.
thank you. Bye.